Captain Hannah Kawai pressed her palm against the cool metal of the command console as red warning lights bathed the bridge of Harmony's Grace in crimson shadows. The distress signal had been broadcasting for 3 hours now, each pulse a desperate cry echoing across the void of space. Her crew of 12 beings from 6 different worlds had gathered around the central display, their varied features united in concern as they studied the incoming data. "The transmission is weak but clear," reported Navigation Officer Yuki Sato, her translucent skin shimmering as she adjusted the communication array. Her species, the Crysthari, were known throughout the galaxy for their precise technical skills. Cargo vessel Haven's Dream, registry number GC7741, they're carrying. Civilian refugees from the Kepler colony worlds. First Officer Ren Takashi stepped closer to the display, his tall frame casting long shadows across the bridge floor. The gill slits along his neck fluttered nervously as he processed the coordinates. "Captain, that's deep in contested space. The Zephyrians have been hunting refugee ships in that sector for months. It's practically a killing field out there." Hannah nodded grimly. She had read the reports. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding through the Outer Rim territories for 2 years now, using biological weapons that turned entire planets into uninhabitable wastelands. Millions of beings had fled their homes, crowding onto cargo ships and passenger vessels in desperate attempts to reach safe space. Most never made it. "What's their status?" she asked, though she could already guess the answer from the urgency in the signals pattern. Yuki's fingers danced across her console, pulling up the technical readouts. "Life support systems are failing. They report multiple hull breaches, reactor instability, and over 1,400 beings aboard a ship designed for maybe 300. Medical bay is overwhelmed with radiation sickness cases." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of the ship's engines and the persistent beeping of the distress signal. Every member of Hannah's crew understood what those numbers meant. 1,400 lives hanging in the balance. Trapped in a dying ship in the most dangerous region of known space, Medical Officer Cass, a gentle being whose species had evolved from herbivorous pack animals, spoke softly from her station near the back of the bridge. "Captain, even at maximum speed, it would take us 18 hours to reach them. If their life support is already failing, they won't last 18 hours, Ren finished grimly. "And that's assuming we don't run into Zephyrian patrols on the way. Standard protocol is clear. We report the beacon to the nearest military outpost and maintain safe distance." Hannah stared at the pulsing red dot on the star map. 1,400 beings. Families with children. Elderly beings who had lived through wars and peace. Young couples starting their lives together. Individuals who had already lost everything once and were now facing death in the cold vacuum of space. "Protocol assumes we have time for proper military response," she said quietly. "These people don't have that luxury." She turned to face her crew, seeing the worry in their diverse features. They were rescue specialists, trained to save lives, but they were also beings who valued their own survival. Charging into contested space to rescue a ship full of refugees was exactly the kind of mission that ended with everyone dead and no one saved. "Set course for the beacon," Hannah ordered, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Maximum speed. All departments prepare for emergency rescue operations." Meanwhile, 3 light years away, in the opposite direction, the human exploration vessel, Terran Dawn, received the same desperate transmission. The bridge of the human ship was smaller than Harmony's Grace, built for efficiency rather than comfort. Commander Jin Park stood at the central command platform, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of multiple displays showing stellar charts and ship status reports. "Commander, we're picking up a distress signal," announced Lieutenant Mia Choi from her position at the sensor station. Her voice carried the clipped efficiency of someone trained to deliver bad news quickly. "Civilian vessel, multiple casualties, life support failing." Jin didn't hesitate. "All hands, emergency rescue stations. Medical teams, prep for mass casualties. Engineering. I want every spare power cell, every emergency supply kit, every piece of equipment we can transfer ready for deployment in 20 minutes. The bridge crew moved with practiced precision, but Mia held up one hand as new information appeared on her screens. Sir, long-range sensors are showing another vessel responding to the same signal. Configuration matches Galactic Rescue Service. Standards? Jin nodded approvingly. Good, more hands make lighter work. We'll coordinate with them when we arrive. He turned to his helmsman, a young officer whose steady hands had guided them through 3 years of exploration missions. Helm, push the engines past red line if you have to. I don't care if we burn out half our systems getting there. People are dying out there, and we're not going to let that happen on our watch. As both ships altered course toward the same distant coordinates, neither crew fully understood what they were racing toward. The distress signal continued its desperate broadcast across the void, carrying with it the hopes of 1,400 souls and the promise of a meeting that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. The void of space shimmered as two vessels dropped out of hyperspace almost simultaneously, their arrival creating brief ripples in the fabric of reality. Captain Hannah Ko felt her stomach lurch slightly as Harmony's grace settled into normal space, the transition always affecting her more than she cared to admit. Round her, the bridge crew quickly oriented themselves, checking instruments and scanning their surroundings. Captain, we have visual on the distress beacon source, reported Yuki Sato, her crystalline fingers adjusting the main display. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge fall silent. Haven's dream hung in space like a broken toy, its hull blackened and twisted from weapons fire. Atmosphere leaked from multiple breaches, creating small clouds of frozen gases that sparkled in the light of distant stars. The massive cargo vessel, originally designed to carry supplies between colonies, had been hastily converted to transport refugees. Now it drifted helplessly, its engines dark, and its communication array barely functional. Radiation readings are off the charts, reported Medical Officer Cass, her gentle voice tight with concern. Whatever hit them used some kind of biological weapon. The entire ship is contaminated. Before Hannah could respond, proximity alarms began chirping. Another vessel had emerged from hyperspace less than a kilometer away, its sleek design unlike anything in the galactic database. The newcomer was smaller than Harmony's Grace, but appeared more heavily armed, with weapon systems that seemed both familiar and strangely alien. Unknown vessel. This is Captain Hannah Ko of Galactic Rescue Service. Hannah transmitted on standard emergency frequencies. We're responding to the distress beacon. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came immediately, the voice carrying a strange accent that her universal translator struggled to process. Captain Ko, this is Commander Jin Park of the Terran exploration vessel Dawn. We received the same distress signal. We're here for the same reason you are, to get those people to safety. Hannah felt her gill slits flutter nervously. Terrans. She had heard whispers about them in the outer colonies, rumors of a new species that had emerged from the galactic rim. Some stories painted them as warriors, others as explorers, but all agreed they were unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Commander Park, we appreciate your willingness to assist, Hannah replied carefully, following first contact protocols. However, our scans indicate severe biological contamination aboard the refugee vessel. Standard safety procedures require full hazmat protocols and decontamination chambers before any boarding operations can begin. There was a brief pause before Jin's voice came through the speakers again. Understood, Captain. We're launching rescue shuttles now. Hannah blinked in confusion. Commander, I don't think you heard me correctly. We cannot board that vessel until proper containment procedures are in place. The biological contamination could kill anyone who enters without protective equipment. Captain Ko, with all due respect, people are dying over there right now. We'll handle the contamination after we get them out. On the main display, Hannah watched in growing alarm as the human vessel launched what appeared to be small military craft directly toward Haven's Dream. The shuttles moved with aggressive precision, heading straight for the most damaged sections of the refugee ship. Commander Park, you absolutely cannot board that vessel, Hannah transmitted urgently. The radiation levels alone will be fatal to most known species. You need proper shielding, decontamination equipment, medical support teams. Captain, people are dying. Jin's voice cut through her protests. Ass! We're not going to sit here and watch them die while we set up equipment. First Officer Ren Takashi stepped beside Hana, his tall frame tense with concern. Captain, they're ignoring every safety protocol. This is complete madness. Through the tactical display, Hana could see the human boarding teams entering the refugee vessel through hull breaches and emergency airlocks. The radiation readings in those areas were deadly, the kind of exposure that would kill most galactic species within minutes. The humans were walking directly into what amounted to a radioactive death trap. Their shuttles don't even have proper shielding, whispered Yuki, her voice filled with disbelief. The radiation exposure they're taking. It should be impossible for them to survive. Medical Officer Cass was monitoring the biological readings from both ships. Captain, I'm detecting human life signs inside the refugee vessel. They're in sections where the radiation should have killed them already. Either our sensors are malfunctioning, or what? Hana asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Or they're naturally resistant to radiation levels that would be fatal to us. 16 minutes passed in tense silence as the crew of Harmony's Grace watched the impossible rescue unfold. The humans moved through the dying ship like they were, taking a casual walk, entering areas where emergency protocols demanded full protective gear and limited exposure time. They carried refugee families through sections where the hull was breached, working in vacuum conditions that should have been instantly fatal. Then, the first shuttle emerged from Haven's Dream, its hull glowing with residual radiation. Through the viewports, Hana could see human crew members carrying refugee children, their faces covered with basic breathing masks rather than the full environmental suits that should have been necessary. Shuttle approaching, reported Yuki. They're carrying 37 refugees, mixed species, mostly families with children. And the humans, Hana asked. Alive, Cass said, her voice filled with wonder. Showing signs of radiation exposure that should have killed them, but they're still conscious and mobile. It's unprecedented. As the shuttle docked with Harmony's Grace, Hana realized she was witnessing something that would change everything. These beings, these Terrans, didn't just ignore safety protocols. They seemed to be physically capable of surviving conditions that would kill other species. The question was whether they were incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. She was beginning to suspect it might be both. The rescue operation had been proceeding smoothly for nearly an hour, when space itself seemed to tear apart around them. Reality twisted and bent as massive organic shapes emerged from hyperspace. Their arrival announced by waves of energy that made every sensor on both rescue ships scream warnings. Captain, Hana Koei felt her blood turn cold as the tactical display updated with new contacts. 8 Sifarian bioships materialized in attack formation, their living hulls pulsing with sickly green and purple light. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, grown rather than built, with weapon systems that fired living projectiles designed to consume their targets from the inside out. Zephyrian attack fleet, Hana announced, her voice carrying across the bridge with forced calm. All stations implement emergency evacuation protocol immediately. We have maybe 10 minutes before their bioweapons reach effective range. The bridge of Harmony's Grace erupted into controlled chaos as her crew began the painful process of abandoning the rescue mission. Standard galactic rescue doctrine was absolute on this point. Rescue vessels did not engage military targets under any circumstances. Their job was to save lives, not throw them away in hopeless battles. Captain, we have 230 refugees aboard, reported Medical Officer Cass, her voice tight with the strain of abandoning so many others. The remaining 1,200 are still on Haven's Dream. If we leave now, they die, Hana finished grimly. But if we stay, everyone dies. Begin immediate departure preparations. The Zephyrian bioships had already begun releasing their first wave of attack. Organisms, clouds of microscopic weapons that would devour any organic or synthetic material they encountered. The deadly swarm moved through space like a living fog, spreading outward from each ship in expanding spheres of destruction. Then Jin Park's voice cut through the emergency communications. Calm and steady, despite the approaching doom. Terran dawn to all vessels. We're moving to intercept the attack fleet. Continue rescue operations. Hannah stared at her communication console in disbelief. Commander Park, you cannot possibly be serious. You're talking about engaging 8 Zephyrian bioships with a single exploration vessel. Captain Ko, there are still 1,200 people on that refugee ship. Jin replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. We're not leaving them behind. Commander, this is suicide? Hannah protested. Your ship isn't even military grade. The Zephyrians will tear you apart in minutes. Maybe Jin acknowledged, but those people deserve a chance. All hands, this is the captain. Combat stations, today we find out what humans are really made of. Through her main display, Hannah watched in horror as the Terran Dawn turned away from the relative safety of retreat and accelerated directly toward the approaching Zephyrian fleet. The human ship's weapon systems came online, energy readings spiking as they prepared for battle against impossible odds. They're completely insane, whispered Navigation Officer Yuki, her crystalline features reflecting the tactical displays. Glow. No rescue protocol in the galaxy calls for engaging superior military forces. First Officer Ren stepped closer to the display, his gill slits fluttering with nervous energy. Captain, should we? No, Hannah said firmly. We follow protocol. We cannot risk the lives of the refugees already aboard to chase after impossible heroics. But even as she gave the order, Hannah found herself unable to look away from the tactical display. The Terran Dawn had closed 2 weapons range with the lead bioship and opened fire at what any military academy would classify as suicidal distance. The human vessel was close enough that debris from its target would damage its own hull. They're firing at point-blank range, Yuki reported, her voice filled with disbelief. That's not possible. The concussion from their own weapon should tear their ship apart. The first Zephyrian bioship erupted in a fountain of organic matter and toxic fluids, its living hull unable to withstand the concentrated fire from human weapons. But instead of retreating to a safe distance, the Terran Dawn dove deeper into the enemy formation. Watch their movement pattern, Hannah said quietly. Beginning to understand something that defied every assumption about space combat? Look at those acceleration readings. The human ship was pulling maneuvers that should have crushed its crew under lethal gravitational forces. It twisted and spun through enemy fire with an agility that belonged to a fighter craft, not a vessel carrying 200 human crew members. The GI forces generated by those movements would turn most galactic species into paste against their bulkheads. 15G lateral acceleration, reported Ren, his voice filled with awe. 22G vertical climb. Captain, those readings have... To be wrong, nothing organic can survive forces like that, Les Hannah said slowly, watching the impossible dance of combat unfold. They evolved on a world where surviving such forces was necessary. A second bioship exploded as the Terran Dawn raked it with weapons fire. The human vessel passing so close to the destruction that it disappeared briefly in the cloud of organic debris. When it emerged, its hull was scarred and burning, but it continued fighting with the same relentless aggression. They're not just ignoring safety protocols, Hannah realized. They're physically capable of surviving conditions that would kill any other known species. What kind of world creates beings like this? The battle continued to rage as more bioships fell to human weapons. Each victory bought with damage that should have crippled the attacking vessel. Yet the Terran Dawn fought on, its crew somehow enduring forces and conditions that redefined the very concept of survival. The battle had transformed into something that defied every military textbook in the galactic database. Captain Hannah. Ka watched through her tactical sensors as the conflict evolved beyond anything her training had prepared her for. What had begun as a desperate last stand by a single human ship had become a masterclass in warfare tactics that no academy instructor would believe possible. Captain, I'm reading something impossible, reported First Officer Ren Takashi, his tall frame bent over the sensor console. The humans just launched boarding pods directly at the Zephyrian bioships. They're using explosive decompression as a delivery method. Hannah moved to the display, watching in stunned silence as human attack craft deliberately breached their own hulls to propel boarding teams through space toward enemy vessels. The tactic was beyond reckless. It was using death itself as a weapon. "They're in vacuum," whispered Navigation Officer Yuki, her crystalline features reflecting the blue glow of the tactical display. "No species can survive in hard vacuum for more than seconds. They should be dead already." But the sensor readings told a different story. Human life signs continued to register inside the Zephyrian bioships, moving through sections where no atmosphere existed. The boarding teams were fighting room-to-room battles in conditions that would kill most galactic species instantly. Temperature. Readings inside those bioships are dropping below -100 degrees. Medical Officer Cass reported, her voice filled with medical impossibility. "The humans have been exposed for over 10 minutes now. Their blood should be frozen solid." Through the main display, Hannah could see the results of human boarding actions. Internal explosions rocked the bioships as the invading teams destroyed critical systems from within. One massive organic vessel began listing to port as its living control systems were systematically torn apart by beings who should have died the moment they entered the hostile environment. "How are they still fighting?" Yuki asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Our sensors show radiation levels inside those ships that would be fatal within minutes. The humans have been in there for 20 minutes. The tactical display updated with new information that made Hannah's gill slits flutter with nervous energy. A team of humans had somehow made their way back to the crippled Haven's Dream and were working in its engine compartment. The fusion reactor that had been damaged in the initial Zephyrian attack was now showing unusual energy patterns. Captain Wren called out urgently, "The humans have done something to the refugee ship's reactor. I'm reading a massive gravitational distortion, building up." Before Hannah could respond, space around Haven's Dream began to twist and bend. The damaged fusion reactor had been turned into an improvised gravity weapon, creating a localized field that began pulling 3 Zephyrian bioships toward each other with crushing force. The organic vessels, designed to move through space with graceful biological propulsion, found themselves trapped in an artificial gravitational well. "They turned a broken engine into a gravity bomb," Cass said in amazement. The engineering knowledge required for that kind of improvisation should be impossible to calculate those forces in real time. So the 3 trapped bioships collided with each other in a spectacular display of destruction, their living hulls unable to withstand the crushing gravitational forces. Organic matter and toxic fluids spread through space as the vessels died, their biological systems failing catastrophically. "Rescue 1-2 Harmony's Grace," came Lieutenant Mia Choi's voice over the communication system, crackling with static. "From radiation interference, we've cleared the eastern approach vector. Recommend you begin final evacuation of the refugee ship. We'll maintain defensive positions and cover your operations." Hannah stared at the communication console, processing what she had just heard. The humans, after engaging in combat that should have killed them all, were now offering to continue fighting while the rescue operation proceeded. They were treating a battle against impossible odds as routine support duty. Negative rescue. Hannah heard herself saying, the words coming out before she fully realized she was speaking. "We're staying until every soul is off that ship." The bridge of Harmony's Grace fell silent as her crew turned to stare at their captain. Officer Takashi's gill slits fluttered with shock, while Yuki's crystalline features reflected confusion and concern. Captain Wren said carefully, "You're violating direct rescue protocols. We should evacuate with the refugees we've already saved." "Protocol assumes we're dealing with normal combat situations," Hannah replied, watching another Zephyrian bioship explode under human weapons fire. "This isn't normal. Look at them." Through the tactical display, they could see a human boarding team emerging from the hull of a dying bioship. The beings had spent over 20 minutes fighting in hard vacuum, exposed to radiation that should have been instantly lethal, temperatures that should have frozen them solid, yet they moved with purpose and coordination, already preparing for their next assault. "You're not just ignoring death," Hannah said quietly, understanding beginning to dawn on her. "They're using it as a tool. Whatever world created these beings, it taught them that survival means refusing to accept the impossible." Medical Officer Cass looked up from her sensor readings, her gentle features filled with wonder. "Captain, I'm detecting human life signs that have been exposed to hard vacuum for over 30 minutes. By every medical standard in the Galactic database, they should be dead. Instead, they're preparing for another boarding action. The humans are right, Hannah said, her voice carrying new determination. Some things matter more than protocol. Some things are worth any risk. The silence that followed the battle was almost as overwhelming as the combat itself had been. Captain, Hannah Ko stood on the bridge of Harmony's Grace, watching the last Zephyrian bioship disappear into hyperspace. The organic vessel fled with desperate speed, its living hull pulsing with distress signals that would warn other Zephyrian forces to avoid this sector at all costs. The space around them looked like a graveyard. Chunks of organic matter drifted. Through the void, the remains of 5 bioships that had been torn apart by human weapons and tactics. Strange energy readings flickered where human explosives had detonated inside living vessels. Signatures that her ship's computer couldn't identify or classify. "Damage report," Hannah called out, though her eyes remained fixed on the tactical display showing the aftermath of impossible combat. 3 bioships completely destroyed, reported First Officer Ren Takashi, his voice still carrying disbelief. 2 others damaged beyond repair and retreating. The humans did this with a single ship. Navigation Officer Yuki looked up from her console, her crystalline features reflecting exhaustion and wonder. "Captain, I'm reading human life signs throughout the debris field. Boarding teams are still alive in the wreckage, helping extract any surviving Zephyrian crew members." Hannah felt her gill slits flutter with amazement. Even after winning an impossible battle, the humans were conducting rescue operations for their enemies. They had spent hours fighting in conditions that should have killed them, yet now they were risking their lives again to save beings who had been trying to murder refugees. All survivors have been transferred to Medical Bay, came the calm voice of Medical Officer Cass over the communication system. "Captain, you need to see this." Hannah made her way through the corridors of her ship, passing groups of refugees who had been rescued from Haven's Dream. Families huddled together, children clinging to parents, elderly beings receiving medical care. All 1,400 souls had been saved, though the cost had been measured in human blood and sacrifice. The medical bay was a scene of controlled chaos. Her crew worked alongside human medics to treat both refugees and the human wounded. What struck Hannah immediately was how the humans continued working despite injuries that should have left them unconscious or dead. Commander Jin Park stood near a medical scanner, helping to process the last group of refugee children. His face showed severe radiation burns, the kind of exposure that would kill most species within hours. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle, clearly damaged by explosive decompression. Yet he moved with steady purpose, speaking gently to frightened children in a dozen different languages. "Commander Park," Hannah called out, approaching the human leader. "I need to ask you something that's been troubling me since the battle ended." Jin looked up from the medical scanner, his weathered features showing fatigue, but no sign of the pain he must have been experiencing. "What can I help you with, Captain?" "Your casualty reports," Hannah said, consulting the datapad in her hands. "According to our medical sensors, 40% of your crew sustained injuries that we would classify as fatal. Radiation exposure, decompression damage, thermal burns, impact trauma, yet they continued fighting throughout the entire engagement." Jin's expression didn't change as he processed her words. "Fatal assumes you stop fighting, Captain. Where we come from, stopping means dying. We learn not to stop." "But how?" Hannah pressed, needing to understand. "What kind of training allows beings to function with injuries that would incapacitate any other known species?" "It's not training," Jin replied, turning back to help a small refugee child who was crying for her parents. "It's where we're from. We're from a world where everything tries to kill you from the moment you're born. Earth taught us that survival isn't about avoiding danger. It's about deciding that some things are worth any cost." Hannah watched as Jin gently lifted the child, his damaged arms somehow still functional despite the obvious injury. "What kind of world creates beings like you?" "The kind that doesn't let you quit," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of evolutionary history. "Earth has weather that can freeze you solid or burn you alive. Animals that can kill you with poison, claws, or teeth. Plants that are toxic to touch. Diseases that adapt faster than we can cure them. The ground itself can shake apart or split. Open without warning." He paused, looking around the medical bay at his crew members, who continued working despite their injuries. "We didn't choose to be this way, Captain. Our world made us this way. Every human alive today is descended from beings who refused to give up when everything seemed hopeless." 3 days passed as both ships completed the refugee transfer operations. Communication arrays across known space hummed with encrypted reports about the engagement. Word of humanity's first major contact with galactic civilization spread through diplomatic channels, military command structures, and civilian news networks. Captain Hannah Kowal stood on her bridge as the two vessels prepared to part ways. The Asterisk Terran. Dawn Asterisk had completed repairs to its most critical systems, though scars from the battle remained visible across its hull. "Commander Park," she transmitted as the ships moved to different departure vectors. "I'm forwarding our complete sensor logs and contact protocols to the Galactic Council. They need to know what happened here." "And what exactly happened here, Captain?" Jin's voice came through the speakers with genuine curiosity. Hannah looked at her data screen showing impossible human survival rates. Tactical recordings of combat in lethal environments, and testimony from 1,400 rescued beings who spoke of creatures who refused to abandon them. She thought about beings who used death itself as a weapon, who treated fatal injuries as minor inconveniences, who considered saving strangers worth any personal cost. The galaxy just learned that some species consider impossible just another word for Tuesday.